give you the background a little bit. I don't know how many of you have like a manger in your house, a nativity set. Anyone? Just raise your hand if you have one. Yeah, good. Do you ever thank Luke for that? Probably not. Luke is the only book in the Bible that tells us about the manger where Christ is born. There's no other record anywhere in the Scriptures. Only Luke's gospel has that. You can look at Matthew, you can look at Mark, you can look in John, it's not there. You can look in all the Old Testament books, never talked about being born in the stable, being placed in a manger. Luke, the historian, writes, and in the book of Luke, the whole reason we have millions of mangers all over the world when we have this display set up is because Luke recorded it for us. No other where in the Scriptures is it recorded. And I'm glad to share this with you, and I don't know what we would do without this manger scene, because it makes it personal. It brings his humility and his humanity together in a way like nothing else can. It's just a wonderful example of how God would bring his Son into the world. I would like to go to Luke chapter 2. We're going to start with the 8th verse. And what we read here starting, it says, "Now there were in the same country shepherds living out in the fields, keeping watch over their flocks by night." This was that time of year where they would raise the sheep, and some say some of them would be for sacrificial animals. And the shepherds, they would stay by themselves. They'd be out there for weeks and maybe months at a time. No baths, no showers, just out there living with the animals, out in the wild, rugged terrain. And I heard Erwin Lutzer, he was talking about that this week, and he was going over how bad they might actually smell, these shepherds, living with the animals and being out in the wild. And someone was interviewing one of the shepherds, talking with someone and saying, "Well, what do you do about the stench?" I said, "Well, after a while, the sheep get used to it." So, just one of those things, when you see this, these shepherds living out in the fields, they were out because they're grazing, of course. But then they would have to be more alert at night than during the day. During the day, you could see an enemy from a long ways off. You'd see a wolf coming over, a lion coming over. You could see it from a distance. But then at night, your nocturnal animals, those who would come out looking for something to eat, your wolves and coyotes and animals like that, they know it's easier to get them at night when no one else is around, when they're sleeping. So they would have to be really at their top during the night. And this is when this takes place. We know that in the same country, out in the fields outside of Bethlehem, outside the gates, and you know the city would have gates, and then you had fields around the city where you'd grow and your agriculture would take place in your fields. So they weren't inside the city, but they were in the same proximity, but just not inside the gates. They were outside the gates, and they were in a field. And they're at night watching over their flock. That's how they made it. And if you know anything about it, see, if you're a shepherd and you lost a sheep, you had to pay for that. That would come out of your pay. You lose too many sheep, you're out of a job. And I don't know how much money they would make, but they would get paid based on how many they brought back. But if you lose an animal, you lose two, then you start losing revenue. And so they have to give an account and present them. Even if they're damaged, they have to present it to them. So their job is to keep these animals safe and keep them looking. And if they're sacrificial animals, like some say, they have to be spotless. They have to be blameless to be offered as a sacrifice. So they would have to be kept in top shape. And they would have to be the best of the best. And if these were some of those, like it might have been, if they were temple sheep, then they would have to be kept in top-notch, pristine position, if you will, the best condition they could be in. Well, here's what happens in the middle of this. They're out watching over their animals. In verse 9 it says, "Behold, an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were greatly afraid." If you can imagine, there's no artificial light at all. Back in the ancient Israel, the only light you had would be candlelight, moonlight, sunlight, and that's it. You wouldn't have any other form of light. So here you are in the dark fields, and I don't know if you've ever been out in a dark place in a field at night, and there's no other light around. You can see the stars in incredible ways. We had our first mission trip. We went to Haiti. We went up in the mountain called Tua, Tua. And we were up there at night, and it rained almost every night we were there, except one night. And I went up. There's no light there. It's completely dark. You're out on the island up in the mountain. And when I looked up at the sky, my jaw dropped open. And Abraham's promise came to mind. He says, your descendants will be like the stars in the heavens. I looked, and there's this one little area in the sky, and I already counted 100 stars. And I'm looking all over, and it's just filled, completely filled with starlight. And it was an incredible experience. So here they are at night, completely pitch black dark, maybe a small fire going, enough for them to see a short distance. And then their night turned into day. It says the angel of the Lord stood before them. Now they would hear things a long distance away. They were trained. If they heard a twig crack, it would get their attention. They were trained to listen for anyone. No one would sneak up on a shepherd. No one. They're trained to hear for sound because they can't trust their eyes in the dark, so they have to trust their ears. They could hear something from a long distance away. And so all of a sudden, the next thing you know, there was someone right in the midst of them. They had no idea was coming. Here's the angel of the Lord stood before them. And the glory of the Lord shone around them. And you can see why they were greatly afraid. They had not heard a sound. And next thing you know, here's this angelic being. And it's light all around him and all around the field where he's standing. And it didn't say they were afraid. It says they were greatly afraid. They were terrified. It took them by complete surprise. And when you look at the next verse, this angel starts speaking to them. And what he says in verse 10 is, do not be afraid, for I bring you good tidings of great joy, which will be to all people. He has to tell them not to be afraid. Almost every single time an angel comes, the first thing they says is, do not be afraid. I'm not going to kill you. I'm not going to take you out. Because it would be quite frightening. I've never seen an angel, and I don't know that I want to. But to see one sneak up on you and just all of a sudden be there, and you are completely unaware of it. And he has to tell them, don't be afraid. And he tells them a message. I have good news for you. I bring you good tidings of great joy. There's a phrase in there we want to look at the end, which will be for all people. It wasn't just for Israel. It just wasn't for the shepherds. It just wasn't for those in Bethlehem. It says, this message I'm bringing to you from the throne of God is for every single person. This impacts all of humanity. The entire world is invited to this because this is for everyone. This good tidings of great joy is for everyone on the planet. It's for all people. It doesn't matter what sex, what religion, what ethnic background you're from. There's no way to separate it. It's for every single person. It's an open invitation. Anyone who hears this message, it's for you. And that's what the angel tells him in the forefront. He continues in verse 11. He lets him know, for there is born to you this day in the city of David a Savior who is Christ the Lord. You look at just that phrase, there is born to you, to mankind. And you go back to the last phrase, all people, today. And it says in the city of David, see, Bethlehem, that word is city of bread. I don't know why David chose that, but he wanted that for himself. He took that title, and it's David's city. He had taken that, he had established it, and it was known as the city of David. So when they said the city of David, they knew right away that's Bethlehem. It's actually the house of bread. Now, David was a musician. He was a shepherd. But as far as I know, he was not a baker. But the house of bread belongs to him. I don't know why that title's there. But I know that Jesus, one of his titles, he's the bread of life. He reveals himself in the book of John, and one of the I ams is, I am the bread of life. That's who he is. If anyone's going to live, it's going to be through him. So you have this title here. In the city of David, a Savior. Someone who could redeem mankind. And we're told his title, Christ, the Anointed One, the Lord. So this angel lets him know exactly what's going on. Today in Bethlehem, everything changes. The world will never be the same after this day. What makes this day different from any other? This day, a Savior for mankind has been born. For every single person, their eternity can be different from this day on because of what's taking place. There is the Anointed One who they've been waiting for hundreds and hundreds of years. Matter of fact, we would say thousands of years. All the way back from Genesis 3:15. We're told that the woman's seed would crush the serpent's head. That would be this one. All of Israel had been waiting, and now the world will know that there's a Redeemer, a Savior, born in Bethlehem. And it was on this night that it took place. And now just to have an angel come and tell you something, and we don't know how many shepherds are in the field. Some say it could be 20, it could be 30, it could be 40. And sometimes they would get together at night. The shepherds would have their sheep, but at night they would bring them all together, and all the shepherds would gather because it was safer in numbers. You could bring all of them together, and in the morning they would call their sheep, and their sheep would follow them by name, so you could have 100 shepherds there. We don't know. But there were more than one, and there was probably plenty. So they're gathered there, and they all see this thing. And what would you do if you saw something amazing like that? Well, God wanted to know for sure it was me that brought this to you. And he gives them a sign. And they're told in verse 12 exactly this. This will be a sign to you. Not only am I giving you a message, I'm giving you a verification to the message. I'm giving you a sign connected to the message. And if you see this afterwards, you know that you didn't see a hallucination. All these shepherds get together and they think, did you see what I saw? I saw what you saw. But after a while, maybe they might let it wear off. But there's a sign for them to verify the message is true. And this will be a sign unto you that you will find a babe wrapped in swaddling cloths, lying in a manger. This is an odd sign. Not that there'd be a baby, but you'd find a baby wrapped in swaddling cloths. That wouldn't be amazing. They would wrap the babies and keep them warm. The amazing thing was they would find a baby laying in a feeding trough, because that's what a manger is. It holds hay up off the ground so the animals can eat it. That's exactly what a manger is. So when you hear the term manger, just think that's a feeding trough. That's where you'd feed the animals. And so they would go and they would find this stable, if you will. They would go and they would look, the sign, and they know where it is. It's in Bethlehem somewhere. They know that it's in the city of David. And I don't know how many they went to, how many feeding troughs they saw. Hay, 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 empty, baby. That one is different from all the other mangers in Bethlehem. They found a baby, just like they said, wrapped in cloths and lying where no baby should be. You know, if you did that today, DCF would be called on you. How dare you put a baby outside in the middle of winter in a place where animals live? Do you know how many germs and diseases are there? And how many of ladies would like to have a baby born in a barn? You know how unsanitary that is? Do you know the smells that are associated with it? And I think a little bit later, when Jesus was a little bit older, he would go outside. Shut the door, were you burning a barn? Actually, I was. He's the one who could say that and get away with it, right? Because he was. He was born